And what we're going to do for tonight is just to give you an overview of the agenda. We're going to show you a quick video of just who Asia Society Texas is and what we are. I'd love to hear in the chat too, if any of you have been to visit us before or any of our events. We're here in Houston, Texas. So if you've been, please let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear about that experience. But most people aren't familiar with us, and they're especially not familiar with our education work, which is newer. So we really want to take a moment to introduce you to us and who we are. And then we'll dive into all of the resources. So we'll give you like the big picture overview of what we offer, and then we're going to give you some lessons you can use. And you're actually some of the first groups to see them before they get put onto our online platform. So you're getting early access, and that will all be added to the Google Drive too, that you can use later in your time. So I'm going to turn it over to Phuong, who's going to share our video.
Okay. All right. Can you see the video? Just making sure.
So that just hopefully gave you some visuals of who we are before we jump into the presentation, just some of the work we do. And I'll go ahead and share that as well. So here's our lovely center here. We're in the Museum District in the heart of Houston, Texas. If anyone has been here before, but even if you haven't, just looking at our building, I'd love to hear any thoughts around looking at the architecture, what it is you notice about the building, because it has a lot of cultural significance that we always discuss with students. So love to see in the chat if there are any, oh, sorry, I jumped ahead, I got too excited. Let me go back. What it is you're noticing about the architecture here. Oh, Shelby, it reflects nature, clean lines, nature from Nikki. Yeah, these are perfect responses. Very modern. Mm-hmm. Yep, glass wall. Yes, it's actually hurricane-proof glass. I'll share. It is. So Sana, you must have been with us before too. Yeah, it's a very peaceful place by design, very simplistic yet detailed. Yeah, you are getting it right away, which is wonderful. And you're not even here, you're just looking at the picture. So you're all very astute, which I love. So our building was built in 2012 by a Japanese architect, Yoshio Taniguchi. And he is one of the most famous architects in Japan, especially in contemporary Japan. And it's the only freestanding building he's built in North America. The other one is the expansion of the MoMA in New York City, but that was kind of an expansion on its own standalone building. So we're very excited to have this building here to run our programs through, to bring lots of student groups through. We can teach a lot about Japanese culture, about what you all are picking up on, themes that nature should be integrated within design, that it should be a part of design, that we should try to bring nature in as much as possible. There's a lot of influences from Zen Buddhism too throughout the building, of being very meditative, very peaceful, very reflective. So there's a lot of the geometric issues too, Michelle, that you're speaking to, where there's perfect alignment in lots of different areas. So that is our building. But we ourselves have been around since 1979. We were founded by Barbara Bush and Roy M. Heffington, and we've been dedicated for that many years to advancing cultural exchange and understanding. Our goal and our mission is to really celebrate diversity, to inspire empathy, and foster a better understanding of our interconnected world. So what we did, and just to give you a little background, and I think this is important before we go into our resources, is in 2018, we launched a process with our board of thinking about how can we really engage the next generation of young people and then teachers in our mission and really provide services and resources to them to really bring them to our center and to bring our mission to life. So we did a needs assessment, and I just started working with Asia Society in 2019. And I just knew from my experience in the classroom, there were very limited resources for teaching about Asia and the Asian American experience, that a lot of times, even when you were looking for resources, it was hard to realize, okay, I found this. Is it trustworthy? Can I rely on it? I didn't have a lot of content knowledge myself in a lot of different countries or areas that we would have to teach about. So just wanting to grow my own content knowledge, and then also have those own trustworthy resources I could use in the classroom. Those were two goals of mine for sure. But we wanted to get a lot of feedback on this too. So we did a lot of museum visits. We started a global education steering committee with 30 teachers that helped advise us over the whole process of building out our education project. We also had a student advisory group. We did feedback sessions with over 120 students, and then kept a team council that gave us feedback throughout the entire process, in addition to our interns. And you can see some of the feedback that we got early on from students. So our Asian American students in particular said they never really read about Asian American leaders at all in the curriculum. They were mostly focused on Western civilization. Even in world history classes, world geography, Asia was minimized a lot in the curriculum. They also told us, please don't give us any more video lectures. A lot of this work happened during COVID. So they really did not want more video lectures. They wanted digital resources that they thought were fun, engaging, and interesting, and looked like they were actually designed for students. And then our teachers did want trustworthy, reliable resources. They didn't want to have to vet and search for materials. They wanted to know that what they were using was of high quality. They also really wanted to bring diverse perspectives into the classroom, to be able to share the perspectives of multiple countries and people in a way that was thoughtful and intentional. So throughout this, we developed two key initiatives. We have our Explore Asia exhibition here on site. If anybody has seen it, I would love to hear your feedback in the chat. But it just opened this July, and it's for families, students, all ages actually, but it's really been geared at the K through 12 audience, about traveling through 5 different countries through Asia. And we'll show you some visuals of that at the end. What we're really going to talk about tonight is our online hub called Asia in the Classroom, which is designed to support educators by providing accessible classroom resources for teaching about Asia and the Asian American experience. And we have both a student-facing perspective or resource and an educator-facing resource. So I would love to see in the chat too, if anybody is a webcomic fan. I knew nothing about webcomics until I started working with Phuong and started working with my students. And now I read them too much, and they're just a lot of fun. So we have our student-facing platform, which are the webcomics, and these are very popular now. It's how students consume a lot of media too, is this format. And we've developed original webcomics that are aligned to the TEKS that will be able to meet the learning objectives of every classroom. Then we have an educator lesson portal and professional development hub where you can download lesson plans and get more professional development webinars and get more resources for teaching about Asia and the Asian American experience. So we're just going to take a moment to go into both of these. So webcomics, of course, they're popular among students, but we see them as a really great way to bring in educational tools. When I was in the classroom, I used a lot of graphic novels too, which were of particular help to my ELL students. So they're great literacy tools. They're great ways to appeal to young people and to really focus on authentic perspectives and themes. One of the things when we developed all 14 of these graphic novels, they're original to us, to Asia Society. We've worked with artists from all over the world to develop them. So we're talking about bringing diverse perspectives into the classroom. These are artists and writers and illustrators who actually live and work in the countries that are featured. So you're getting a perspective from that country. So I'm going to give you a few samples and you're actually going to get to go and look at them. So we've got our stories in India. We have the Paws of Paharganj, and this is a story about a group of students working together to open an animal shelter in their hometown. And so they learn about Indian culture as they go through the story as well. The author has these little moments she really wanted to do where the characters will all go get chai, then they'll stop and they'll learn how to make chai. They'll go get street food and they'll stop and learn how samosas are made. So they're learning a lot about Indian culture as they read this really compelling story about really just community building and people working together. And this aligns to our overall philosophy within Asia Society of our education platform and our education work. So we align to the TEKS, we believe in the TEKS and use the TEKS, but we have a global competency framework we work from too, that really focuses on students investigating the world, listening and analyzing diverse perspectives, communicating ideas and taking action. So all these stories have those elements as well. So we're teaching about what we see as global competency and global citizenship. One of the things teachers told us too is they really want to incorporate more stories about Indian independence. It's something they're not as comfortable teaching. So what we did here is we brought the story of Usha Mehta to life. And she is a young woman and college activist who was inspired by Gandhi and started an underground radio broadcast to help fight for India's independence. And then we have our Asian American stories as well. So one of the things students told us is, okay, there are a handful of Asian American stories out there, and there's actually quite more now post-COVID, but for a while there was really nothing. And they were saying, I'm tired of reading about kids in New York and San Francisco and Chicago. Like, where are the Houston stories? Where are the stories from the South? So what we did is we worked with a lot of the interviews with the Rice Houston Asian American Archive. And we collected stories that were very local to Houston, but they also, a lot of them have Texas roots and they expand beyond Texas too. So here we have the G family. So this is one of the first Chinese American families in Houston. And it's a civil rights story where they really work with the African American community here to help desegregate the restaurants in the 1950s and 60s. And the second part of the story is focused on Martha Phuong, who became the first Asian American elected to office in Houston. So again, we're telling these stories that are often not told, that have a very local perspective. And then within the webcomics, we have moments where there's interactive learning blocks. So this was the part that teachers usually get very excited about. I was very excited about. I love the webcomics, but what I really love is the moment where students can actually reflect on what they've learned and use that in an assessment tool. So what students do, you can turn the learning mode on with a comic and they'll be able to see these questions that pop up. They answer them and they hit submit. If you use Google Classroom, it'll go right to your Google Classroom. If you don't, you can download a PDF and email it to your teacher. And here are some samples. We've got multiple choice, short response, annotation, answer matching, hotspots, timeline, immersive text. And when we develop these questions, we really try to align to the EOC and STAR test, making sure that we're looking at similar formats, and ours are a little more visually interesting than what we see in those tests, but they do have that alignment there. And they're more visually interesting because we try to make them embedded within the story so they don't stand out. But it is a really great assessment tool. So I'm actually going to stop here for a moment, and I'm going to have you all dive into the website for a moment. And let me just put it in the link. And this is a free open access website. You can use it in your classroom whenever you would like. So I'm going to give everybody like 2 minutes, and I just want you to go ahead in. And if you click the comics button at the top left, you'll see all the comics by country and time period, and just kind of pick a few to go through. And then I would love to hear some feedback in the chat as you're going through. So it's 5:22. We'll give you to 5:25.
And I can also share it in the background too.
Perfect.
For those of you who are big comic fans are interested in manga, you may notice even the design of the website, we utilize a lot of those themes and stylistic choices. So a lot of panels and lines and angles. We really wanted to make this something that was attractive for students, as it is our student-facing um, application. And we got a lot of feedback from our teen council, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, and our interns, and they were really honest with us. They let us know if it looked good or attractive or something they were interested in, and we're really happy with the end product. And as Jennifer mentioned, you can see the 14 stories organized by countries or time periods. And here are stories that are based from Houston. And what is great about these stories, you'll see two right here. These are based on real people who have contributed to the city in one way or another.
Yes, and Laura Gao is one of our favorite artists we worked with too. She's from the Dallas area, so we've got some Dallas representation too.
Mhm.
And actually, one of the stories too starts in Dallas, where there's a restaurant that is opened.
Yeah, I'll show
Um,
you.
so
Oh, go
so
ahead.
I think you'll be excited that Donnie already has a question. Is there a way for students to make the comics? And
Ah, we'll
we
go
get this
over
a
a little
lot.
bit of that. Yeah.
We definitely want to encourage students as creators and as people that have their own stories and narratives they can share. So, yes, and we would please, we're going to share information at the end if you are going to use these in your classroom, and we're going to give you tools to do that here in a second. We would love to hear about it and get your feedback on it too.
And something I just want to reiterate too is the website, you can obviously access it through your computer, but it's mobile friendly. We actually designed it to be mobile first in regards to accessibility and students and what they may have at home or can utilize in the classroom. So it'll scale down to fit whichever device you're using. And if you have an account, and I'll show you what it looks like in the back end, you'll be able to have it in learning mode or read only mode. So you can go through and see the comic as is, but if learning mode is on, that's when you can see the interactive blocks that Jennifer mentioned. So I'll scroll quickly so I can give you an example of one. We also have some light animations that we've included from the artist just to keep things entertaining. But for example, here's one of the questions that shows up, and that's when it's switched up in this mode, and examples of the different interactive blocks as well. I see a great question.
Yes.
Oh, a couple of great questions. I'm
Yes, I
scrolling
think we
now.
can start with the Asian myths and folklore. Can you show them the ones that
Yeah.
I think the trunk sisters, and the yeah,
Yokai
well,
too.
you go, yokai. Yeah, there's a lot of good
Yeah.
ones. And just
Yeah.
before actually we do that, I think it's important to answer the question: is every story based off a true story? No.
Hmm.
There no. All of the Asian American stories, all four, those are true Asian American narratives. And then the story of Usha Mehta in our Indian story, she is a real life person. Um, but other than that, they are fictional. Like, this is a very fictional story. It's a really good
Right.
question.
Which is great because it just gives you different ways to introduce culture through fictional and nonfiction, non-fictional stories. And I think, for example, this yokai story has to do with Japanese myths and folklore. And in the way this artist we worked with was really great about introducing life in the countryside, what everyday life looks like as well. What is super amazing with these various stories, especially the ones that were created by our Asian artists, that was intentional. So we would have that perspective from someone living in that country. And students don't need a login to access, but they'll need a login if they want to utilize the interactive block. Same with teachers. There are incentives to having a login because you can earn fun badges, which are custom illustrations that are authors and artists have created that they can earn as they read stories. You can create reading lists. You can embed these readings in assignments with Google Classroom if that's something you utilize. So there are benefits to having a login, but it's definitely open access.
And we don't collect any student information. It's just their name and email address. We don't have any access to that. It doesn't get saved or stored or anywhere. So there's no, we collect no information about the students from this.
And so I know it's about 5:28. I'll be mindful of time because we have a lot to share
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
activities to do too.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for all these great questions. And I'm just going to very quickly go through our educator portal because we're having questions about that already because you all are our advanced group that's jumping ahead. So we have a online portal. I think some of you signed up today. I got some emails, which is really exciting. And we wanted to provide innovative pedagogy curriculum that you could use project-based learning to be able to teach these courses or teach these graphic novels. So we have a series of lessons that we've developed working. These are some of the scholars we worked with. And I should mention scholars review the stories. They review our content at Asia Society for our exhibition. They review these lesson plans. They give us ideas mostly for a lot of things too. So we really work with them with community partners as well to develop the lessons. And they include everything you need to teach. So all the PDFs, presentations, video files, everything that you would need. And we know students and educators is some of the early feedback that we've had about the program. We have some free lessons available. And then we have some that are just like $10 a lesson. And then we also have a full license that you can purchase as well. That will give you access to everything. So it's a mixture of everything. So the student facing portal, again, is all free, all open access, and our teacher portal, as there are some free resources and there's some paid at different levels. We also have packages where we work with schools or school districts, and then we have a teacher cohort we'll talk about at the end that we're launching as well. So there's lots of different ways to engage in that. And then tonight I'm going to turn it over to Phuong, who's going to share with you some lessons that will eventually go onto the portal, but they're very new. We've just finished developing them. So you're getting the preview of that, and then, or not the preview, they're done. You're getting the the complete lessons as being a part of this webinar, and we will upload these to the Google Classroom that you all are a part of, so you will get full access to them.
Yes. Thank you, Jennifer. And for this portion, if you're comfortable, it's totally okay if you're not. Feel free to have your camera on because we can do some of the activities together and it'll help me kind of gauge how you're feeling and understanding, but we can continue utilizing the chat as well. Uh, you heard a little bit about my background through Elizabeth's introduction earlier. Storytelling is really important, and I bring it into a lot of my work here at Asia Society as well. And working on the web comics through this project was actually a big dream of mine. So I have been a web comics manga reader and all of those nerdy things since I was very young. And I think a lot of your students, if not most of your students, could kind of relate to this. So we designed a couple of activities to introduce cultural relevancy and making sure we're giving students an opportunity to really think about their own culture and how that connects to their work. And these are tools and activities that you can totally adapt to fit your needs, to fit your classroom, and to share the work that you're currently studying. So I will go through some examples and we'll have an opportunity to do some of these examples together as well. But to get into it, one thing that I really enjoy doing when introducing Asian comics is to break down the different types because not many people know. Right now, Japanese comics manga is super popular as well as anime, but people don't realize that there are many different types of Asian comics as well. So manhwa is Chinese language comics, of course, produced in China. Manga are comics and graphic novels from Japan. And manhwa, which sounds similar to the first one, are general Korean terms for comics or any print cartoons. Jingjan is comics from Vietnam, and Chuchakatha is comics produced in India. And a lot of this a lot of these comics are influential to each other. So manga, which has been popular for many years, and anime, if you're familiar with any cartoons such as Pokemon, um, even Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, those are anime or animations for Japan, and a lot of those stories derive from manga, these comics that were written. But right now, what's trending is manhwa, and it's also known as webtoons. I know some of you earlier mentioned that your students had introduced you to webtoons and web comics, and that's what helped us decide on how we wanted to showcase our stories as well, is hearing that feedback and that long form scrolling kind of method of reading was really popularized in Korea. And now it's getting popular in other countries as well. So some Japanese artists and writers are now transferring their manga into that scroll format as well, and as well as other countries. So I like to tell students that there are different types of comics, and of course, comics here in the U.S. have had a great big influence on comics in Asia, and now it's a big cultural exchange. So it's a great way to, when you're just talking about the type of story you're consuming, where did it come from? How did it get popular? Um, what has changed over time? Creating the conversation around these really popular pieces will make it really helpful for you to introduce cultural learning and social studies as well. So we already went over Adventures of Asia, but I really wanted to get into cultural responsive storytelling projects that you can do in class. Dr. Geneva Gay, a big researcher in education, coined the term cultural responsiveness, and I think it's really important to look into that. It's really focusing on how you can really engage with students by centering cultural experiences and history, and how their personal history can really help them feel connected to the work that they're learning. So we are doing this in many different ways. And before we get into the different types of cultural responsive activities, there are some thoughtful considerations that we can kind of discuss. So I kind of break it down to 2 points and sub points as well. But number one is being culturally responsive from an educational point of view. So how can you consider current events, trends, people's experiences, and perspectives to teach? A lot of times too, I've heard from students, history feels so far ago, and how is it relevant? How can you tie history to current events and people's experiences? So asking these questions, asking students to ask these questions, I think really inherently makes the work responsive, right? Culturally responsive. Number two, understanding diversity and inclusion in creating student work. So how are different backgrounds important in making your students feel welcome? So those are some things that you can think about as you're designing these projects and adjusting some of the projects you do in the class. So one way I love to do it is to create your own story. I think someone earlier asked in the chat, how can students create their own webtoons? There's many ways. Of course, the web comics and webtoons that we showcased earlier are digitally based. And so a lot of the artists, actually, I'll stop sharing because I want to show you some behind the scenes work that some of the artists have shared with us. And a lot of those stories were created through utilizing a tablet or an iPad. But a lot of times, and we've got a chance to really get to know these artists, they're able to really work on the outline design before they even get to that point. So you can kind of see these are digital illustrations, and they use different platforms, including Photoshop, um, and other resources. Here you can kind of see a better view of the tablet. Procreate, it's really popular and it's a really an affordable program. So depending on your students' level and their access, this if they wanted to dive into creating a webcomic immediately, you could do it digitally. But my recommendation for students just starting out is to do the work on paper, and to really tie back to manga and that kind of artwork and popular type of comic from Japan as well. So you can see here something that we do at Asian Society every year. It's our most popular camp. It's called Manga Pop. And one of my favorite ways to have students create their own stories is to do it through creating as their own zine. And that is really simple. You just need a sheet of paper, a pair of scissors, and your utensils, your coloring utensils of choice. And what they can do is first think about their roles and how they can develop their own story. And this is great for a group project. This is great for individual work, but to really create these different roles for students to really put themselves in the position of a creative. So how are they as a writer? How do they want to create the content? How do they come up with a story that is based on something that you've been teaching? How do they have problem solving opportunities in their stories? In a lot of creative writing, a lot of times students just want to create the problem and solve it immediately. But a big piece of advice I have for students is to do try, try, try again, and then to try to extend their story and adding world building details that they have learned from you all. Um, this gives them an opportunity to feel like an expert in their story. And a best place to start too is to have students write about themselves. I always say that you know yourself best. So how do you interact as a writer? Utilizing some of the tools that I mentioned earlier, you can be creative as an illustrator. You can draw your own stuff, scan it in, use the digital tools I showcased from some of the artists before, but you can also utilize a lot of imagery online and manipulate that as well. And then how will students read each other's works? So think about how they can critique each other's storytelling or ask questions and elaborate on some of the content that they've seen their peers created. So this is one of my favorite activities that I do with students that say they don't know where to start. And this is a worksheet that I created long ago, but I've edited the columns many, many times. And in this version of this activity, the characters and settings are actually based on characters and settings within the web comics that we showcased earlier. And what we have done here is we've given students an opportunity to roll for the particular character setting and problem just to get started. So for example, if you roll a 1, your first character is yokai, which are Japanese spirits. And if you roll a 2, maybe your setting of your story is Jeju Island in Korea. Roll a 5, you found an unlucky penny and you start it. So this is something I'd like to do together as a group. So let me see. I'm gonna stop sharing just for a second because when I share, I can't see your faces. I'm gonna pull up a dice simulator and we can do this as a group just to indicate how easy this is to build your own story and introduce, again, the different concepts that you want to discuss. So let me do that. And what we typically do when we've done this activity with many groups, you can even have the students build their own dice and roll it as part of the activity. But for something like a virtual workshop like this, I just like to pull up a dice simulation website so we can try together. And what I'll do is we're going to roll for some concepts and give you some time to come up with some ideas, and we'll share some of these ideas and how we can create manga, webtoon, and another type of activity that I'll show as well. So for the first one, I'm going to go ahead and just roll the dice, start. And Jennifer, if you can jot down what we roll, that'll be helpful. So four. So
I
for
got it.
4, we'll have our first character is warrior. And then we're gonna roll again. Stop. 2. So our setting for 2 is Jeju Island. And then last roll. 6. So that is chased by a bad guy. So just to recap for everyone, I'm pretty sure we got warrior, Jeju Island, and chased by a bad guy. So I'd love for all the teachers here tonight to jot that down. So your character is a warrior, Jeju Island, and your problem is chased by a bad guy. And we're going to spend
Yes.
a couple minutes to come up with some ideas. And I would challenge you to somehow connect it to whatever you're teaching your students right now
Yes.
as
Yes, we
well.
kept it pretty general on
Hmm.
purpose. So,
Right.
um, and if you need to Google where Jeju Island is, there's no shame in that. That's fine. That's part of
Hmm.
the learning experience too.
Yes.
So enjoy. We're excited to see what you come up with, and you can put it in the chat when you're ready.
Yes. So I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes to come up with some ideas. I'll do it too. Jennifer as well. We can all do it. Elizabeth and Kameko, I hope you can come up with some ideas as well. So we'll share. So I'll give you a few minutes.
Do you mind showing the template again for the story?
Yes, yes, and we'll upload that as well. So
Okay.
let me share it. See.
And you can be very creative with this. If you feel like one of the elements is restraining, you can make it a minor piece of the story too. Just be open to it.
Right. And this has worked for me in so many different scenarios where students are like, I don't know how to get started, but this helps you get started and then you can incorporate things. Um, One of my favorite settings actually is your favorite restaurant. So students can include that and make it really relevant and yourself. That's also something you roll for. But I've seen so many different versions of the same story. Oh, yes, the last one is chased by a bad guy. That's the problem. And as much detail that you can come up with, like Nalda, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I see stranded on Jeju Island and the warrior is chased by a bad guy. So you included the stranded, but you don't have to be stranded. And if you're stranded, are you native to Jeju Island? Are you from Korea? How did you get to Jeju Island? Thank you. Ooh, okay, Rebecca. A warrior has escaped from the USA in the 1800s and a bad guy to be teleported to Jeju Island to find safety. Oh, can I assume that you're teaching about US history in the 1800s?
Yes.
Yes.
And the US was actually in Jeju Island in particular in Korea in the late 1800s too. So there is even a historical connection. But
Right.
this is we love time travel and like teleportation, and that theme comes up quite a bit in the webcomics because it comes up a lot in actual webcomics too. So that's super creative.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're using the chat, but if you want to unmute and share as well, we'd love to hear from you. So maybe another minute or so. And of course, following this workshop, you can keep developing some of these ideas. Okay, Kelsey. Warrior
Ah.
traveled to Jeju Island to hunt down a mystery person, but with little to go on, he ended up being the one chased by the bad guy. Oh, that has a lot of action. I like that. I'm curious what kind of bad guy and why this warrior was the one who was asked to hunt this mysterious person. And then Christy, during the Russian Revolution, the Russians invaded Jeju Island in Korea after being chased to a bad guy all the way from Siberia. They fought like warriors, but ultimately defeated. Ah, Elizabeth, look at Jeju Island. Want to incorporate air, mist close to the sea. Yeah, Jeju Island is really known for its beautiful nature. Um, and so I like that you included some of those elements, Elizabeth. Johnny. Once upon a time, there was a great warrior living in Japan. During his free time, he enjoys exploring the culture of Jeju Island, chased by a bad guy. Unfortunately, bad guys trying to keep out all warriors. They are peaceful people. Hmm. Oh, Nikki. Okay. Warrior Cat. I like it. First non-human character so far. Wait,
That's great.
unless Cat is the name. You can correct me. Unless Cat is the name. Roam the healing forest and search for a perfect nap. Okay, I'm assuming it's an actual cat. Warrior Cat enjoyed nothing more than a sunny spot high in a tree for his post-lunch nap. Just as he approached this favorite tree, a group of wild dogs nosily approached. Ah, yes. Okay, I'll read about two more and then I'll show you some other ways we could incorporate these. Let's see.
These are so creative.
I know, and so fast. This took you minutes. Chinese warrior tries to extend the Silk Road to
Nikki,
Jeju
sorry.
Island. Trade gunpowder, however, is stopped by a bandit who steals his gun. Ooh, a real cat. Ah, thanks, Nikki. Thanks for
That's
confirming.
why I can picture it.
And then Gandhi in
Mm.
a parallel world is a warrior and gets captured and is taken to Jeju Island only to be hunted by evil British. Oh, alternative world. That makes it interesting. And then, oh my gosh, there's so many. I'm gonna have to come back and read these. But let me show you some other opportunities and ways to share these stories. So I showed you that you can do it through a zine, and actually let me show you how easy it is to make a zine. I consider myself a writer, not an artist, so I have trouble with arts and crafts, and even I can create this. So making a zine is super simple. You just need some regular printer paper. You fold it into 8 sheets, and you cut a slight slit down the middle right there, and then you fold it together. And what's great about these is because you can utilize your sheet and make copies on how the story is made and share with everyone. So you can have very like many versions, as many as you'd like. So like for example, how I showed here, we made copies of those and we're able to distribute these stories. So you can have your own conventions and things like that as well. But I like to add that you can really again adapt these to things that work with you. So a big way we have done it too, and this was in collaboration with one of our colleagues, is creating your own visual novel. You can do that as well. So this is a QR code if you wanted to scan and try it out on your phone, but I can show you what that looks like as well. So you can really decide how um, deep or how wide you want to utilize these resources. So for example, this is a visual novel that was created through Google Slides. I'm just checking you're still able to see my screen. And so you can click
Yes,
through.
you're good. You're
Okay,
good.
good. So this is actually our center, right? And you can utilize actual images, uh, your own illustrations if you so choose, or other illustrations, and build these stories through Google Slides. And it feels like an actual visual novel video game that you can go through. So I'm just demonstrating it to you on here, but you're able to try for yourselves if you scanned the QR code earlier. So this is an example of the options. I'll let you choose. Does anyone want to unmute and let me know which one I should click? Give a moment.
Or you can put it in the chat too.
Yes. What's great about this too, and I think especially for I mean any teacher, but history and social studies teacher, is through visual novels, you can make different decisions and go through different ones. Ah, Rebecca and Kelsey chose the same thing. Okay, so you can go through and have different answers as well. So I just wanted to give a moment and showcase those different options. But you can really, again, expand on how you want to do those creative works. Another thing I'd like to show, Jennifer talked about our Asia in the Classroom resource as well, which you can see here and some of the sample lessons she mentioned earlier. There's a lot of opportunity to really dive into the different cultural resources we have connected to the web comics we mentioned earlier. But I would even look at these lesson plans and lesson guides as a guide. So in this example, we talked about Yokai's first summer job, which I showed a little bit earlier here. Let me scroll to it to show you. And again, this is a contemporary story that discussed yokai, which are spirits and things that are unexplained in Japan. And one of our colleagues, Nina Shimaguchi, who is our Japanese outreach educator, designed a whole lesson plan on yokai and taught about yokai. So you see a lot of the resources, links, different activities as well. And I specifically wanted to show this is because you can be discussing yokai and spirits from Japan, but how do you want to connect that to your students and what you're teaching as well? And a lot of really fun, engaging conversations I had with Nina, who worked on this lesson plan. I thought about spirits and things that showed up in my childhood as well. And again, building those cultural connections are really important. And so something we talked about is, for example, I grew up and we used to dare each other to go in the restroom and do Bloody Mary. Well, in Japan, there's a really famous yokai named Hanako, which is always found, I believe, in the third or fourth stall of the restroom. And it, again, sounds like just fun conversation, but then you can really dive into, well, how did that story come to be? What cultural components show up with that? And that's why I really enjoy with a lot of the lesson plans we got to do with our colleagues and scholars as well. How do you make this your own? So from something as broad as the roll of dice worksheet that I showed you from earlier, creating your own zine or creating your own visual novel, how can you adapt some of these ideas? So I really want to spend time to um, discussing some of the work that you're doing. What are some challenges that you've come up with introducing new subjects or having cultural conversations? I'm interested in why you decided to come to this particular workshop to learn about the resources we have, because I think there are ways that we can kind of discuss to see how this works best in your classroom. And you're all such a creative group because we got all these wonderful stories in a matter of minutes. Um, but I wanted to leave some room for discussion and questions as well. Jennifer, I think I heard you talking too.
Oh yes, I just wanted to yeah, we'd love to. That's what we wanted to do with the last 15 minutes here, is really help you all think about how you can apply these to your classrooms and answer any questions you might have too, as well. Yeah, you said it all already, Phuong, too, but I just wanted to, if you could pull up the, I'll just give you an example too, some things, the role story worksheet too, because this is like a really great tool that you can use in so many different levels. So I know you all are, I think I heard from Elizabeth that some of you might be newer to the classroom. So this is something where if you're, say you're studying a specific era or time period, you can really adapt, right? So the characters could be real people that you've studied in during a unit in class. The setting could be different. If you're doing the 13 colonies, it could be different colony locations. If you're doing different countries in World Geo in Southeast Asia, it could be a list of all those different countries. And then problems can relate to some of the geography problems that you've studied, like climate change and push-pull factors and things like that. So you can really make this as aligned to your curriculum as you like. We do encourage you to keep it fun and light too, like so you have maybe heavier things, but adding in the lighter elements like time travel and things like that. So the fun part, the kids love rolling, they love making it interactive like this too, and they like when they get challenged to do something like, oh, make this a time travel story, make this set at your favorite restaurant. So just balancing the core curriculum that you're teaching with the funner, lighter elements that get students really engaged and can still show their learning as they go through.
I saw some two really
Yeah, we
great
got lots of questions. Yeah.
comments. Nikki mentioned that she wants to embrace culture like manga and tea and balance, but don't want to devolve into stereotypes. I think that's even you having that thought is such a wonderful start. And a way to do that, I think, is to have students explore where some of these ideas come from. So, for example, I've encountered a lot of students that have only gotten to know Asian culture through anime, and that's ultimately a very narrow view of Asia and Asian cultures, right? And I think it's introducing the different perspectives and having that as a discussion, and how you want to do it thoughtfully. And and I feel a little repetitive, but when you embrace your own culture and your own personal history, I think you become more thoughtful on how you're exploring a new one. So I think that is a great way. And just to have that conversation with students, like, hey, we want to look into this, but we want to be careful about identifying or relying heavily on stereotypes. I think that is really, really interesting. Jennifer, did you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's great that you're asking it. I agree with you, Phuong. And I think that the more that we can I'm thinking actually about the conversation we had with the artist in our Song of Tea story that's set in Japan, who, one of the teaks in world history is teaching about Japan and the trade in the Tokaido Road and the trade between Kyoto and Tokyo, and really the involvement of the shogun, the samurai, the different tradesmen, the woodblock print, all the different roles, right? And students tend to get really fixated into samurai, right? And they have all these conceptions about samurai, most of which are not fully realized, right? And we were talking with the artist when we were going over this teak, and she actually studies this area of time too in Tokyo, and didn't even want to talk about samurai because she feels like they're so misrepresented. And we were like, no, that's why we want to tell the story, is to give the different nuances and things like that as well. And she got really excited about that element of it too. And we embrace that. And we actually tell that story through a tea waitress, right, who comes from a rural village to work at a tea shop as people are coming and traveling through. And we see a very different perspective on samurai, where they're kind of downtrodden a bit and have a lot of political issues tied to them. So, I think it's about exposing students to as much as possible through these programs and having those conversations, and having your research and your content knowledge brought up too as you're researching it as well. Yeah, and that goes to Rebecca's point too, I think, here.
Right. And you learn a lot. Like I'm Vietnamese American, and I've learned a lot. I grew up here, and working on the two Vietnamese stories that we have and engaging with the artists and authors from over there, getting into the research, you come to recognize some of the stereotypes you've realized as well. And something that I thought was really exciting working on the Trung sister story, Ancient Bracelet, which I got a chance to help write, is a lot of people didn't realize in Vietnam that there are a lot of ethnic communities as well. So again, doing that research and bringing it up, some of these things that are very common and understood over there isn't really common and understood here. So trying to bring into these opportunities of research and really making sure that you understand that you're not the expert and students aren't experts as well. And this is really exciting for me because I heard from my mom and grandparents. I knew about the ethnic communities, but it wasn't something that we really, in the indigenous communities, it wasn't something that we really discussed regularly. And so, of course, even my fellow friends and peers growing up had no clue. So just making sure we have that time to really build in and teach directly, I think makes it really thoughtful for students and teachers. Um, and it's becoming comfortable learning about things you don't know about too, right? So I'm really happy to see in the chat that there's a lot of excitement about these resources. Um, and
I just had to
that,
share, I was just sharing some images, sorry, Phuong,
yeah.
from the Trunk Sisters story too, because I'll add to a lot of things. One of our board members said this when she was reviewing this, and she's like, I'm so tired of there being these misconceptions about these like meek Asian women that don't have any control or agency or power. Like these are two sisters who basically overthrow imperial rule in their country and fight for independence. So it's a very powerful story, but it is one perspective. There's a whole other perspective on this story and what happened. So I just think going back to that question of like these are diverse perspectives, and they're all one perspective, right? And you can't rely on one perspective or one narrative, like one anime movie, to guide your whole knowledge or understanding of something, right? So I think really emphasizing that when you're going through these novels, and having that too.
Mhm. I also see that I think Reiki, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, is looking for a way to get to teach away from videos and having a variety. Um, I think even trying out some of the like cultural components is something we do here at Age Society. We have workshops that are connected to the exhibitions that we offer, our art upstairs, and a lot of the times we have hands-on activities that we can do. So right now we have a wonderful contemporary show, a contemporary Chinese show. So we are doing calligraphy. So what are some activities that you can do that connect to the culture and things that you're studying? To really, really have that stick, I think could be an option. Like researching some things you can try with your students or have your students try or encourage them to try at home is really helpful as well. Let me see. Oh, thank you. See if there's anything else. Teaching geography, I would like to dig deeper into social aspects of Asia, respectfully, and believe these activities and ideas will greatly benefit your students. Yeah, Drake, that's awesome. Um, and a big thing I learned here at Asia Society, and Jennifer already mentioned diverse perspectives, but something as simple as a map, as a tool, represents different perspectives. So my colleague Nina, who I referenced earlier, lives in Japan. And of course, I grew up here looking at a map from the US perspective, but with a Japanese map, Japan is centered in that map, and that already shows a different perspective. So, looking at even things like tools and maps to introduce different perspectives, I think makes it really logistical and easy to understand as well. Oh, Jessica, you're starting your unit on Asia next week. I'm really excited to hear that. And this is not limited. I think that's what's great about our work here too. It's not limited to content about Asia, right? It's these activities and tools. You can do it with um, other subject matters as well. Oh, I love that. Shelby shared last year when she taught about India-Pakistan partition, showed a clip from Miss Marvel. It brings a visual to the event and something they're familiar with in pop culture. Yeah, I love using pop culture as a tool to connect.
Yeah, Miss Marvel's a really cool resource, and That's really great that you did that. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Okay, and some of you asked about a newsletter. So if you go to our Asia in the Classroom website, um, and I'm going to screen share it. Phuong went to this briefly too, and this will review. Um, it's a very basic website to start with. So here's the front page, and then here are our lesson guides. So there are some that are free. So we have the Tea Song novel I was talking about with the different characters along the Tokaido Road. That's free. So is the story of the students coming together for different resources. So to build an animal shelter set in India, and then the G family story as well, which is a story of Asian American immigration. So I think somebody mentioned in the chat too, they were teaching about the Chinese Exclusion Act, some other issues too. A lot of that comes up in this story. So this is a good one. So there's some free resources. We have some more as well. So you could go and see more courses and see just the different topics too. That we have. The Cultural Revolution, this was something that was always very difficult for me to teach. And this is a really great lesson. We worked with a professor at University of Arkansas to develop on looking at political posters and how you can use that to teach about the revolution. One of my favorites, a Sushi King story. If you all go to HEB and you eat sushi at HEB, which is a very Texas thing to do, right? There is a story behind that, and Glenn Gondo is the man who's brought that to first to Houston and through all of Texas and now nationally. And he is very passionate about bringing Japanese culture to mainstream America. So that's his story. So you can see if you want to focus just on Japan, there's some lessons there. And then you can get the license. We can work with us. We work with a lot of schools and districts that packages for that level too, but we have a lot that's free, and you can sort here by content, by area. We even have some STEM lessons, which are exciting. And then our newsletter sign up is right down here at the very bottom. So you can enter your email here, and this is free. We don't ask for any information from you other than your email. And then we can collect your information and then be able to, or collect your email and then be able to share out some updates as we upload new lesson plans and things like that.
And if you have any additional questions about any of our other resources or even our programs here at Asia Society, we'd love to discuss that too, or anything you want to share from today's workshop, because I know we have about 5 minutes left. And this has been really fun. I love doing the roll of story activity and showcasing our comics. It took a long time, but I'm glad it's here and we are able to inspire students to do it themselves. I think that's the best part, is to remind them that they can write their own stories and create their own stories. Jennifer Melissa asked, are there previews for the paid lessons? She's interested in the Silk Road one.
Yes, just email me and Phuong and we can work with you on that. So let's put our emails in the chat, and then I'm going to put my Calendly link too. So like the last time we did this, we had a teacher who went back to their principal, and we ended up meeting with them very quickly after to get a school-wide kind of program and license. We also go out to schools and we do like presentations and workshops, and then you can also come to us, and we have a beautiful, let me just take a second because we've got 4 minutes left to share the images from our Explore Asia exhibit. So if you bring students here on a field trip, I'm just literally going to take a minute because it's so fun. If my mouse will work. So we have 6 interactive stations across 5 different countries. So this is through China, India, Vietnam, South Korea, and Japan. It's EdTech. It's very student-centered and student-guided, where they can make their own digital lunchbox. We have interactive maps that students can play with. It's like a geography teacher's dream. So there's maps are fun, they're interactive, they're engaging. We have a bullet train ride where they get to go in their own Shinkansen and go through the 5 different countries through historical, cultural, and iconic sites. And we have a nice reflective water garden activity at the end where they connect to stories of famous Asian and Asian Americans, local Asian Americans as well. Think about their own values and build that moment of connectivity before entering their final reflection. So there's a lot more to do. It's a lot of fun. We take field trips of all different levels, and grade levels. So it's been a lot of fun. And the field trip can be anywhere from an hour to 3 hours, depending on how big the group is. If you want to add on, we have this interactive drumming experience. We've got workshops we can add on. So it really depends, Rebecca, on how much you want to do. Then if we could close Phuong, if we have a link for the, or they can email you for more information about the cohort too.
Yes.
And we can do that. And then, yes, we're open to the public Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 5, and then till 7 on Thursday. But we can work with you if your group wants to come on a Tuesday or something. We can work with that. We try to keep within our public hours, but we can be flexible if we need to. And you know, I know school schedules can be tight, especially here in the last 2 months. We are getting quite booked for May for AAPI month. So a lot of teachers are looking at resources there. And I think we'll go ahead with our cohort recruitment now, which we're excited about.
Yeah. You know, we have a lot of resources and a lot of programming opportunities, and we talk about diverse perspectives a lot. And we think it's important to do that with educators as well. So we're looking at educators from all different types of backgrounds to join our cultural studies cohort. This is the inaugural group. And these are members who would be able to get access to our latest resources, help build their own resources, contribute to programs. How our organization is designed is split up into 4 pillars, which include arts, business, culture, education, policy as well. And you'll get access to a lot of the speakers and presenters that come here. And so it's just an opportunity to build your experience as a global educator and contribute to some of the work that we're doing here. So that is open. We have an application going. What I dropped is a link that tells you an overview of the cohort, and in there you can also find the application to join the cohort as well.